everyone. Today I am going to be briefly discussing what I would have done with the Man of Steel. Now, in case you don't know what the Man of Steel is, basically it is the new Superman movie that came out fairly recently. It has been both praised and criticized. I feel like that there's a sort of divide among as to people liking it and completely disliking it. I sort of would say that I am in the middle when it comes to this, but I think there are a lot of major issues with the film, and I just kind of wanted to discuss the things that I would have done if I had been in the director's chair, or in the writer's desk, wherever, to make this movie different from the final product that it was. The interesting thing about Man of Steel is that it approaches Superman in a very different way. Traditionally, Superman is seen as the very bright, colorful kind of hero, the hero that, we aspire to be, but probably don't have in reality or in existence. He's sort of a very cartoony hero because, again, he can do all of these things. And I think there was this sense of the movie trying to make him a little bit more humanistic and be a little bit more grounded. So he's not just, the invincible Superman. But I think this comes with a problem. And this problem is that instead of focusing in on trying to make Superman a likable character, they instead put in all of these kinds of flashbacks that don't give context to Clark as a character. Like, they give you a sense of what he's ultimately supposed to represent, but it doesn't give you insight as to really who he is. Or his real struggles, because usually the flashbacks are very short and then it cuts to various different things that happen within his life. So it's really hard for the audience to attach to one particular instance within his life. And I think this is a problem, especially when you're trying to adapt a superhero. You want to create a really good backstory. You want to create a good understanding of why the superhero came to the state that he is. And I think that the flashbacks really didn't add a lot of value to the story. I mean, it gives you a sense of atmosphere and emotion and such, but it really doesn't give you context into the characters, into what they are going through. So I think that was a major issue with this movie in particular. There is also the very sort of, I almost want to say this part kind of annoyed me within the film, where they address Superman as sort of the Messiah, like that he can do no wrong, he's Superman, and there's also this really weighted importance as to, why he's the Messiah, or there's sort of like references to the fact that he is the kind of person that's going to save us, even though he's technically not a person, he's from another planet. But regardless, this, I think, really deters the ability to create character development, because you're just building up this fictionalized kind of character. And I know Superman is supposed to be based within fiction, but you have to give him some kind of human qualities, human abilities, and you have to make the character stand out in some way, especially when it comes to this kind of superhero-like movie that you're trying to go for. Because, again, Batman has the distinction of being very dark and brooding, and, being sort of a loner. And not being able to, really develop real relationships. You have Spider-Man, who's kind of trying to balance those things out, you know, being a superhero, being sort of that independent figure, and then also having his relationships and keeping those things intact and unharmed. And with Superman, it's almost like, since Superman is given so many abilities and so many capabilities to do a whole lot, that it's really hard for the character to really grow and develop. And so I think the movie decided, like, okay, we just need to make him the Messiah. We just need to make him the glory man of all superheroes, who can do no wrong, and, you know, doesn't have to question, you know, his allegiance or whatnot. I mean, the film does, though, highlights at certain points this aspect of him. You know, like when he ultimately kills Zod, that's kind of like some development there. But again, it's so rushed. Like, the movie doesn't really focus in on trying to make Superman human. It just only brings out in spurts, and it doesn't seem like the movie doesn't seem like it flows well. I felt like, at least with the Dark Knight series, I haven't seen the third one, so I can't really say, but at least those films, that you got a sense of them flowing, and that they had a lot of narrative that was sort of easy to follow, but still complex. In here, it feels very confusing at times, especially with all the flashbacks, and that them making Superman this Messiah, but then also making him, you know, deal with these human-like struggles. It's very difficult, I think, to really go with one side or the to go with both sides of trying to make this superhero seem like he is a god, but then at the same time give him some of these kinds of flaws. And I think that whole Messiah bit is just doesn't allow for the character to really, I guess, develop all that well. But I'm not saying that that's not the approach that they couldn't have gone with. I think they could have gone with the whole Messiah approach, but then also this aspect of him being human and having these various flaws that he has to deal with. They could have done that. There was that capability, but I don't think that the overall execution of that balance was really well done. And it feels everything's kind of mushed. Especially with the action sequences. There's a lot of zooming in and zooming out, and people don't seem to suffer in pain in this movie. The action sequences, although they are really well done, are like completely very over-exaggerative. Especially when Superman, you know, is flying through buildings, and you're wondering, is he really saving people, or is he really making things a little bit worse? I think you could argue probably the same thing with other current superhero films like the Avengers, you know, where they ultimately do a lot of destruction as well. But there seems to be this sense of the movie not being able to flow all that well with what it's trying to ultimately say. And I think that's really the major problem. And I think they could have done flashbacks, but I think they should have had a significance. They should be a little bit longer, and they should provide context into Superman and him growing kind of as a character. Again, with the Messiah bit, you can make him this kind of Messiah-like being, but you can also make him sort of human. Because again, I think that's really the approach they were trying to go for, because again, Jesus, you know, man, but also God, whatever. You know, that aspect you could work into. But I don't think it was necessary that they put in the Jesus symbolism. I don't think that even needed to be in there. You could just, people would know what you mean, I think, if you were to say somebody's the Messiah, but then have him also be human. And if there was less exaggeration, I think, within the action sequences and a little bit more, and I think if certain things were illustrated maybe a little bit better and provided with at least a little bit of context, then that would have probably made the film make a lot more sense and flow a lot better. Again, you can have over-the-top, exaggerative action sequences. I think that's totally fine, but I just think that sometimes within this film it felt like it was overly exaggerated to the point where it was hard for people to, I guess, at least the ones who dislike the film, be grounded into what is going on with Superman. And if you're doing a superhero movie, you need to have things flow well, and you need to have kind of a consistent narrative. And I felt like this movie was lacking it, especially when you have a lot of subplots, which again, I think that creates issues too. So my solution would be to have flashbacks, but have them focus on Superman and his growth as a character over the years. Again, you could really dive into his childhood. Why not do that? I mean, they always go from flashing to when he's child, when he's man. You know, you don't need to do that. You can just focus in on, you know, his childhood and then go from there and have him be a man. You almost don't even really need the flashbacks unless it's maybe like a significant point in his life where he flashes back and then he goes back to his childhood and then it stays in his childhood and focuses in on his childhood and his development so that we couldn't care, because we want to ultimately care about a superhero, and if he's not given a sense of a personality or kind of a purpose, it's really difficult for us to identify with the character. So again, I think that's really the issue here. Also, the fact that, you know, we sacrifice other characters in the process for trying to emphasize the whole Messiah bit and the whole point of how the movie itself is important somehow. I think if they focused in more on trying to, again, enforce sort of these ideas of being a Messiah, but also on these ideas of the human-esque qualities, then we would have probably had a stronger narrative in understanding Superman's struggles, because maybe he can be interpreted as very godlike, but then also there's a lot of human elements because, again, he was raised human. So you could interpret it that way. And I think if they had stuck with a flowing narrative like this, then it would have worked. And again, you know, less exaggeration with the action sequences, no zooming in and out. Have actually context into people dying. Like, don't just put people to death just for the sake of putting them to death. And try to make things flow a lot more and avoid a lot of the subplots and just focus in on Superman, because that's really what we want to see. I mean, what's the Man of Steel supposed to represent? Superman. Not all of these other points and bits. But ultimately, I think, had they done these things, they could have come up with, I think, a stronger product. The villain, for me personally, wasn't, I don't think, a huge issue. Although I think more context maybe could have been given to the villain, and having us maybe sort of sympathize with him, especially considering the fact that he's, I guess, supposed to be one of Superman's race or whatever. So, had they given more context to the villain, I think it would have made it even stronger. What else? I think that overall its execution is just okay, and I wouldn't say that it's one of the films I completely dislike, unlike a lot of the other films that I've been going over, but I will say that it does have these qualities where you go, ooh, it could have been, had you executed it well, it would have been good. But I think a lot of the execution within this film just did not stick, at least for me personally. And I think that's just because I know that they could have executed a better product, and I know that they could have done so much more to make this more like The Dark Knight, or make it more like the other superhero films that we've seen over the years. I think there could have just been, I think, more to show Superman in a new way. And again, I'm not against him being in a more dark and brooding setting. I mean, I'm not really against that at all, especially when you look at how similar Superman's backstory is to Batman's backstory. Like, it's pretty much the same. You know, parents die, you know, become a superhero. It follows in that same formula. And I think it's just how you execute the formula. And I think the execution overall for this film just did not suit well to, I think, some moviegoers. And I think definitely there could have been some improvements. But regardless of that, I still think that there is maybe hope for them to improve upon these issues once they do the Superman and Batman movie. I think that's going to be in like 2015 or something like that. But I'm not getting my hopes up because they want to make Ben Affleck Batman, and I just don't know how that's going to work, because I don't think Ben Affleck can pull off something like Christian Bale. I mean, yeah, he won't have maybe the deep voice, but I don't know if he really fits the personality, especially since he's not really played like dark and brooding characters. He's played very lively and energetic, and I think sometimes maybe more maybe business-oriented characters, but not to the extent of a superhero. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe he can pull something off. I'm not saying that that's not a possibility, but I think really the Man of Steel can take the criticism and realize that, look, you can make something good out of this. It doesn't need to be the way it is. You can improve. And I think ultimately the suggestions that I've made in this video, I think just highlight the importance of making those changes, because they will, I think, allow the audience to get invested and allow the audience to be more engaged. And I think engagement's really important to have, especially when you want to do action sequences. You need to be giving context to some of the characters, unless you just want to see stuff blow up. I mean, that's totally fine. But I think the problem with this film is that it didn't know what it wanted to be. It almost seemed like it wanted to be a deep study into Superman, but it didn't know how to do it. And then it's just like action sequences. I mean, at least the Fast and Furious films know what they are. They know what they are. And this film, I don't think, knew what it was trying to be. And I think that was a huge, huge issue, too, for, I think, moviegoers as well. Because, you know, you're taking a very iconic character and not having it, I guess, executed well really shows. Whereas if you're going in and just watching a movie just to see some stuff blow up, you're not going to really complain when it's a Fast and Furious movie, because that's what all their films are based on, car chases and things blowing up. So, and Vin Diesel. So, I mean, I think, though, that's really all I can say when it comes to Man of Steel. I think it's pretty straightforward. Just these concepts and ideas that I think were presented on the screen just weren't fully executed to their advantage. And I think that what I would have done is basically everything that I've stated in this video. But I think that's really all I can say. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But until next time, everybody,